What's up, y'all? Welcome to Willpower Astrology. I'm Will, and today I'm going to be talking about Saturn in Pisces transit. Okay, so last month, Saturn entered the sign of Pisces, and its retrograde motion is not going to tip it back into Aquarius. So as of March 7th, 2023, 6:34 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, until May 24th of 25, 8:35 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and then it's going to retrograde and come back. And then from September 1st of 25 to February 13th of 26. So we'll be fully moved through this energy at the beginning of 2026. And it just kind of started last month. So let's talk about that. So I have this listed on the website post. If you want to check out my website, it has the info written down. But the last time Saturn was in Pisces was May of 93 till about April of 96. So that mid 90s moment. Then we had December of 64 to March of 67. It's like a mid 60s moment. Then we had February 35 to January of 38. It's like a mid 30s moment. And then we had April of 1905 until March of 1908. It's like a mid aughts. Over 100 years ago, right? Okay, so keeping those time periods in mind as we get into talking about this. So let's talk about Saturn as a planet. Saturn is, in olden timey astrology, considered a malefic, which means that it has bad or hostile energy. Like they would say, depending on the position of Saturn in your child's birth chart, your kid would be gay, and that's bad because, whatever. You know what I mean? There'd be things that, like, if Saturn is here, then you're probably a psycho, like things like that. But in traditional astrology, we think of Saturn less as like a malefic or as like a bad omen. And we think of this as it's the planet that kind of has to deal with the concept of boundaries and restrictions and constraint and form. You know what I mean? Because Jupiter, the previous planet, is just going out and out and out, and it says expand and yes and grow and do all this stuff. So Saturn has to come through and say, listen, but these are the rules. You know what I mean? You can't grow uncontrolled. It's cells growing uncontrolled in your body, that's called cancer. So we need to make sure that at some point those cell productions stop and that your cells regulate in the way that they need to, right? So Saturn is boundaries, limits, tests, trials, lessons you have to learn. You know what I mean? I've heard it called many times like a time lord. Like, so over time, as you learn your lessons, you get rewarded by Saturn. But if you don't learn your Saturn lessons, then you just stagnate. You know what I mean? You keep butting your head up against that same wall. So this comes into, everybody has a Saturn placement in their chart, right? And around the time that you turn 30-ish, like 28, 29, 30-ish, depending on the degree of it and depending on when you were born and blah, blah, blah. But around the time you turn 30, you have Saturn returning to the same point it was when you were born in your chart. And this is where your Saturn return happens. And when your Saturn return happens, this is when it's like, have you learned your lessons? Have you done what you needed to do? You know what I mean? Have you taken and applied these trials that you've gone through and then make it work for you? And so if you do, Saturn rewards you. But if you don't, you just have to keep doing, like, banging your head up against that wall, learning those same lessons, going through those same trials until you figure your shit out, right? So I think there's like a emphasis when people talk about Saturn that it's this negative connotation, that it's like, it's the heavy, it's here to like put you through boot camp. You know what I mean? I've referred to Saturn as boot camp dad, whereas like Leo, the sun, is like happy fun dad. Saturn, Capricorn, and in olden timey days Aquarius, that's your boot camp dad. That's your dad that says you got to do your homework before you go out. You know what I mean? Like, whatever. Anyway, so Saturn is going to create moments where you become tested, that you have to like show your adaptation, right? Yeah, let's keep it brief. All right, so then the sign of Pisces, we're going from Aquarius, which has to do with networks, connections, friends. It's how we relate on a group level, right? Like, this is my school friends, this is my work friends, this is my church group, this is my political group. You know what I mean? It's our networks of people. These are my Facebook friends. That's very Aquarius. These are my Instagram mutuals. That's very Aquarius. You know what I mean? It's how you identify as a part of a group. And it's kind of the role that you play out when you are within a group. You know what I mean? The placement of where Aquarius in your chart can really show you where it favors group dynamics in your life, right? So people with a lot of Aquarius energy can be social butterflies. People with a lot of Aquarius energy can be great talkers. You know what I mean? Because they want ideas. It's that fixed air concentration of mental energy. Like, I want ideas. I want to hash it out. I want to discuss. I want to whatever. You know what I mean? They're not afraid to kind of spar a little bit verbally and mentally. But people that are also rocking a lot of Aquarius energy can be a little bit aloof, a little bit distant, because maybe they're connected to so many people that maybe they don't have deep connections to a lot of them, right? So anyways, we're going from group dynamics oriented, fixed sign, air, Aquarius, okay? And once we transition into the last sign of the zodiac, which is Pisces, it's the end of winter in the northern hemisphere. It's the end of fall, or the end of spring in the southern hemisphere, right? It's the opposite. I can't do that math. Anyways, so when we go from fixed air sign Aquarius, which is about group dynamics and functions and kind of our hopes and dreams and projecting that out into the groups that we share common ideas and goals with, right? So when we go into Pisces, this is the mixed water element. So mixed, mutable is the word I'm looking for, the mutable water element. So the mutable signs and the mutable houses take the energy of the previous two signs, the cardinal sign, which would, in this case would be Capricorn, and the fixed sign, which in this case would be Aquarius. So Pisces is like a mixture. Sometimes it's Capricorny, sometimes it's Aquarius-y, but what it really is its own watery. You know what I mean? It can adapt. Sometimes it can be more like go get 'em and focused and like driven and ambitious like a Capricorn. But at times it can just be like, hey man, I'm just here to hang out. I'm just here to be a part of the group. Like, what's the deal? You know what I mean? They adapt. The mutable signs adapt to what's going on around them. So the water signs have to do with emotional energy. It's kind of your internal subjective feelings, right? So Cancer, the first water sign, has to do with your gut. It's your gut feelings. It's the womb. It's the water of the womb, right? With women and the breasts, the brebs. And so Cancerians, they feel things very subjectively. And it's like this thing that comes up from their guts. It's like bubbles up. I think of Cancerians, it's like the fountain of youth. And they have this like direct channel to their literal guts. And when they get a gut feeling, you trust that because Cancerians are tuned into their own wavelength, right? So then the second water sign of Scorpio has to do with shared values. Scorpios are more tuned in to the people around them. Sometimes Scorpios will neglect their own emotional whatever because they're more worried about these connections that they have and like the energy and the push-pull that goes that way. So sometimes it can get into manipulation or like controlling, or you know what I mean? Like that's obsessive quality because I'm giving all of my energy to you. I'm giving all of my energy to my spouse. I'm giving all of my energy to my business partner, whatever. So it's like intensity and fusion, right? So Cancer is very much a solo feeling. It's about how I feel. It's coming from my gut. It's my intuition. It's a direct line from here to your brain. Do you know what I mean? Scorpio is the connection from your brain to the brain of the people that you share values with, that you are like locked into relationships deeply with. So Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac, mutable. Pisces is a combination of all of the previous zodiac signs. Sometimes I've heard like jokingly Saturn or Pisces be referred to as the trash can of the zodiac because it's like a combination of all of them. So like sometimes a Pisces might be really bright and sunny and fiery on one day, but then they like shut it down. It can be like a winter that lasts 1,000 years. They can really emulate these different emotional states because whereas Cancer is like the tide in the moon, right? And then Scorpio is like deep subterranean caves and like stalactites and stalagmites forming ice and crystallizing and kind of like the pressure of the magma under the Earth's surface, right? Pisces is the whole ocean. And we know more about outer space than we know about our own ocean. Do you know what I mean? So it's like the deep down to the Marianas Trench or whatever. It's the waves, it's the hurricanes, it's all that water. It's the subcurrents. It's this whole like, and the point of Pisces is basically that we wash away, right? We wash away back into the ocean. So it's the last sign of the zodiac. Aries represents birth. It represents kind of like the fire that pushes the seed to sprout, right? It's like an initiative energy. It's the spark of life, the spark of creation. And then we're going to go through this whole journey. And when we get to Pisces, that's where we die. That's where our literal particles get buried in the earth. And then we become like plants and shit. We literally, scatter our ashes out into the ocean. We literally dissolve and become one with everything again. So the ocean is a huge metaphor here. Dissolving, dissolution, like Pisces, it says we're all one. Do you know what I mean? We all started from the same dust and we're all going to return to the same dust. And so there's this kind of connection to the 12th house of subconscious. Pisces is not just like the previous two signs. Capricorn is publicly minded. This is how I'm going to present myself in public. This is how I'm going to present myself at my job. This is how I'm going to present myself in my career. This is how I'm going to present myself on YouTube. This is how I'm going to present myself in public. And when you're all this kind of stuff is very your reputation, your standing, how you feel you are a part of the community. And then when we get into Aquarius, it's not just about my career, my track, my whatever. We get into groups. Who's on my team? Who's on my, who's got my back? Who's got this? It's groups of people coming together in these ways. So when we get to Pisces, all that stuff dissolves. All of these groups, we dissolve into the collective consciousness. So Pisces is not just tapped into their own intuition, like Cancer, or tapped into the intuition of the people that are close to them, like Scorpio, but they're tapped into everybody in the room, their neighbors, so it's like a collective consciousness thing. They're tied, their emotional receptors are so finely tuned, people that are dealing with a lot of Pisces energy, that every emotional impression around them creates like an impact or an effect. And so they could be very easily influenced, especially Pisces children can sometimes not really know who they are until they're older, because they're just a sponge. They're just absorbing all this energy of people around them, because we just all wash away into the same thing. We wash away into collective consciousness. We wash away into like these impressions where it can be overwhelming to take in everything all at once, right? But Pisces very much is everything everywhere all at once when it comes to that like emotional impression. It's like if we're using the ocean as a metaphor. Did I say weird things? I'm gonna have to watch this back. I don't care. Using the ocean as a metaphor, it's like how sharks can smell a drop of blood miles away. It's very that. Like Pisces are like, what was that? I felt something. I heard something. Even if they don't consciously think about it like that, I can assure you that they noticed every little thing about your interaction. They also might be imprinting you and your personality. But whatever. So anyways, talking about the sign of Pisces being this collective consciousness, we dissolve, we wash away. And it's also like our feelings, right? But it's like out here. So when Saturn comes through, and we talked about Saturn giving form and Saturn giving shape and Saturn saying, these are the rules. And Pisces like, no, wash that away. No, I don't want to play by those rules. You know what I mean? I think this quality of time starting from March and then going till about 25, 26 is going to be very much like trying to build a sandcastle when we're in high tide. Okay? So you can pack that dirt up no matter how much, but if that tide is coming in, it's just going to wash it away. Do you know what I mean? So my central metaphor for the quality of time of Saturn and Pisces is that we're constantly just like, we're trying to go, let me look at this. Oh, dissolved. Oh, let me look at this. Dissolved. Oh, let me look at this. Dissolved. You know what I mean? It might seem like shit is coming out of the woodwork to kind of wash away all of our efforts or belief structures that we're trying to build our life around, right? So I think a major way that this is going to play out practically has to do with the concept of misinformation and disinformation. And I understand that I'm, a woo-woo ass bitch sitting here talking about astrology or whatever. My readings are open, by the way, if you want to get a reading. Hey, I understand that it's like this woo-woo concept of astrology, but I think that so many people are so not media literate that I think misinformation and disinformation is going to play huge into the next little while, especially with AI kind of on the rise as it is right now, deep fakes, all this kind of stuff. It's going to be your responsibility to do a little digging, right? You might have to be the prospector. You might have to sift through all this muddy water, all this bullshit, all this crap to get that little gold nugget of truth, right? You have to be aware of who wrote this article, why did they write this article, who's paying them to write this article. Do you know what I mean? So we can't take stuff at face value. We have to realize that there's people that are actively trying to get you on the wrong page at this time. All right. So the point of misinformation and disinformation is not necessarily to get you to believe something crazy right at once. It's not trying to get everybody to believe the big lie of, they were stealing the election, so we had to do January 6th. But it's like, if you say it enough, if you keep putting out all of these like, well, I just wanted to talk about it. Well, I just wanted to ask questions. Well, I just wanted to blah, 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 blah. We know what the fuck happened. We know what happened. Stop obfuscating. Stop, you know what I mean? Anyway, so during this next quality of time, misinformation and disinformation is going to be a huge deal, especially because we are in this quality of time as this next presidential election cycle is happening. And this is going to have to go in like kind of tandem with my other video about Pluto and Aquarius, which I've already done a Pluto and Aquarius video, but I'm going to do another one. So also in March, Pluto moved into Aquarius. So there's these massive energy shifts happening right now, okay? So I think that especially over the next little while, we have to be really vigilant against misinformation and disinformation. We have to really know where our sources are coming from. We have to really stop letting these baby boomers get away with dumb shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, for real. We have to start standing up and being like, we have to be Dakota Fanning. Was it Dakota Fanning that started Ellen's downfall, where she said, no, actually, Ellen, that's not true. That has to be us. We have to be the one to go, actually, I looked up a little bit and you're wrong for this, this, and this reason. You know what I mean? We can't take anything at face value because, right. Like I was saying, the point of misinformation and disinformation is not to get you to believe something crazy outright. It's to muddy the waters so that you become tired and you disengage from looking for the truth. It's to make it so crazy out there that you're like, I don't know what's real. Oh, well, I guess it doesn't matter. And then the people that are doing this shit keep getting away with it. You know what I mean? So every time we got to say no, we got to say stop, we got to say get yourself right, we got to say get your fucking shit together, because we're headed for an extremely volatile time. And this is going to be part of my Pluto and Aquarius video. But this next quality of time is going to be hectic. So we need to make sure that we have the mental acuity to make sure that we're sifting through all the bullshit and that we get to that little gold nugget of truth. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with a pile of shit. Okay? So for real, and not for play, misinformation and disinformation is real, and don't play into it. Do not play into that shit. Okay? So anyways, Saturn and Pisces. Let's take a look back at these dates. So we had a mid-90s. We had a mid-60s, a mid-30s, and a mid-aughts, right? So every 30 years, like we said before, it's kind of cycling through these different signs. So when I was looking at these different times, there wasn't necessarily, like, you look at any periods of time like that, there's going to be something that stands out, right? To me, what I noticed is that there wasn't any one thing that like stood out about the time. But what I did notice is that each of those moments represent a major cultural shift. The mid-90s is when Mariah Carey single-handedly made hip-hop mainstream. We had a complete paradigm shift about taking this kind of underground art form that was these like, black kids from the city or whatever, and now it's like this worldwide phenomenon that was suddenly cool now for everybody to be doing it. Do you know what I mean? So we had this cultural paradigm shift, right? And in the 60s, right before the Saturn and Pisces dropped in the mid 60s, we had Beatles on Ed Sullivan's show. So we're talking about like British invasion, rock and roll, you know, all the rock moments that kind of led to this flower power of the 70s, right? We had a major cultural shift in the mid 60s, specifically with music again, but like storytelling, you know, everything just kind of, we had new stars, we had new music, we had this different paradigm after coming out of Saturn and Pisces. So then going back to the 30s, I actually dug down and did a little bit of research about cultural trends in the 30s. So we had forms of music like jazz that had become, jazz and ragtime had been starting in like the 1890s, 1900s, 1910s. Jazz had its huge fucking moment in the 1920s and became this moment. When it was 1930s, we're in the Great Depression, and during Saturn and Pisces is the time where jazz kind of turned into blues and folk music kind of turned into country music. You know what I mean? So like there's this different stuff that's gelling as in these really critical Saturn and Pisces times. And then if you go back to the aughts, there's a ton of shit happening. There's like monopolies, robber barons. Like I think we're kind of almost in the aughts again in terms of like from the 1890s to the 1900s, like we're dealing with monopolies again. We're dealing with robber barons again. We're dealing with like, you know, all the same type of shit. And culturally, I think that the shift that we're going to experience coming into this next couple of years, 24, 25, 26, is for me, I think Americans in particular are going to suddenly be experiencing a lot of other cultural stuff from around the world that usually doesn't break into America, right? Like pop artists will be huge everywhere else in the world, but then they won't really take off in America, right? And we've seen stuff like in the last couple of years, like K-pop has really taken off. I think that's where we're headed. I think that this cultural shift that we're into right now is specifically going to like open the door for world culture to kind of come into the American market, I guess. I don't know how you want to say that. Like, I know it's really fucking like annoying to be like, it's not real if it's not in America because I'm an American and I've never heard of that. But like, you know what I'm saying? I think that it's like this dissolving, right? I think suddenly a lot more people are going to know about K-pop. They're going to know about Eurovision. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the cultural trend that we're headed on right now. Okay. Because I think everybody's like brain is fucking mush from this pandemic moment. I think nobody really has the kind of willpower to really wear a mask in public or do anything like that. So I think that other things are going to happen. Pisces is what is unseen. The 12th house is house of hidden horrors. So an astrologer that I love on TikTok who goes by Astro Lori, Lori Rivers, I think is what her name is. I think I've mentioned her before, but she was talking about, oh God, what was she talking about? Oh, viruses are things that are not seen. So we're already seeing a proliferation of viruses now. This avian flu, this H1N1 that's starting to infect mammals, spreading. You know what I mean? It's going to dissolve. It's going to just become, we're all one, baby. We're all one. So COVID is evolving to the point where they might change it from SARS-CoV-2 to a new strain. Like it's completely different now where it's SARS-CoV-3. The virus is adapting. It's getting smarter. You know what I mean? We're looking like stuff like monkeypox, the algae blooms. You know what I mean? Like what was that other one that there was like a whole thing. These other diseases, Ebola, my drag name. Check me out if you want to follow me. My drag character, her name is Ebola Cherries. But like Ebola had a huge breakout recently. Marburg virus, you know what I mean? Like there's these huge things going on that I think are going to start because of global warming and climate change, because of our shitty pandemic response, because of misinformation and disinformation. I think these illnesses are going to start spreading. And this isn't just the exotic ones. It's like we're starting to, because everybody's gotten infected with COVID so many times, their immune systems are now fucking just shit. So now we're getting kids in the hospital dying of strep A. You know what I mean? There's all these like ailments that are coming back that shouldn't be, but it's because people's immune systems are so fucking worn down that they can't fight off the common cold no more. So I think that's where we're headed. I think we're headed to more disease, more you know what I mean? Like more climate change induced disease, more misinformation and disinformation induced disease, proliferation of viruses, bacteria, fungus. You know what I mean? Uh, so not to freak anybody out, but yeah. Oh, and then the other thing I noticed, if you look at the times that Saturn was in Pisces, in the 90s, we were just a few years away from War on Terror, 9/11, Operation Iraqi Freedom. In the 60s, we were already in the Vietnam War, but we were just a couple of years away from like the worst crazy parts of it that happened in the 70s. Do you know what I mean? And let's not even get into like what happened with the neocons in the 80s. But anyways, in the 30s, we were just a couple of years away from entering World War II. Like World War II had been going on, but America didn't enter until just a couple of years after Saturn in Pisces. So then same thing in the aughts. A couple of years after Saturn in Pisces, we're in the trenches in World War I. So a trend that I've noticed is I think that maybe not for right now, maybe not for a couple of years, but in a couple of years, we're going to be in full-blown war. And that's my prediction. I think that in a couple of years, like we're already in a worldwide struggle from Russia invading Ukraine and all this shit going on and the proxy war with America and all this shit. Like we're already in a global conflict that already is going to like what's going on in Ukraine is going to impact millions and millions and millions of people's ability to eat, because Ukraine is like the breadbasket of like Eastern Europe and Asia and Africa. You know what I mean? So like we're already in it. And so I think this war is going to escalate. I think US with China, I think is really scary to look at. Like, anyways, we're headed to war. Sorry about it. Hopefully we enjoy these couple of years of like cultural renaissance. Thanks, Beyonce. Anyways, what else? Saturn in Pisces. So that's a bunch of crazy shit, like looking at historical parallels. I think if we're trying to look on the bright side, if we're trying to look to the Saturn element of if we meet our challenges and meet our 27 minutes, Jesus Christ, I just went off, bitch. Oh. If we meet our challenges head on, if we learn our Saturn lessons, then I think that the quality of these next couple of years could actually get you some emotional grounding. You know what I mean? I think that you'll be able, if you really learn your Saturn lessons of Saturn and Pisces, you'll be able to distinguish and differentiate what energy is coming at you from who, how to stop some of it or how to keep some of it. Do you know what I mean? I think that emotional grounding, emotional maturity, psychological maturity, there's many benefits to meeting these challenges kind of head on. It might seem like shit's just coming out of the woodwork. But the more that you just go, okay, I'm gonna keep building my little sandcastles. Maybe this time I'm gonna try different tools. Maybe now I have a bucket and a shovel to build my sandcastle, and maybe that can withstand the ocean hitting it. You know what I mean? So I think there's great personal things that can happen. I do think that there are great strides forward as a culture and a society that we could make, but having watched the last couple of years, and Saturn and Aquarius in particular being the failure of the collective to act, I really just am not seeing it. I think we're going to have to learn some really hard lessons the hard way, and it's going to leave deep psychological scars. So anyways, good time. Saturn and Pisces. Have a good day, everybody.